I'm Lindsay Elliott. I'm class of '04.
Drew Oserchuk, 02.
Brian Kendig, '06.
Matt Morello, 04.
'04. So when our group was on the second European tour that the Doox had ever done, we were getting off of Paris Metro and heard a Doox call. And I believe it was either Alex Funk or Blake Esselstyn who happened to be in the train station at the same time.
It was Blake.
It was Blake Esselstyn.
Yeah.
And we thought, who is this man in a tweed jacket?
Or no, it was, I don't remember.
That's how this whole panel is going to go.
Buckle up.
This panel's on the Millennial Doox. We skipped the 90s for some reason. It's not like I was in the planning committee. I don't know how that happened. But I wanted to just talk about what the group was like in our era, or ask you guys what you thought about what the group was like in your era, and sort of have it be a little bit of a snapshot of how things were before and sort of how things have evolved. So maybe I'll open up to any of you just to say, when you were rushing the groups on campus, or maybe you only rushed the Doox. What was your impression, or what drew you to the group?
I had a Drew.
What drew?
I was saying this on the ride up. I had a misimpression of the group, but it was fine. It seemed like something about the rush shirts and like them out on campus during rush or whatever. It seemed like a super sporty group. And it didn't turn out to be super sporty, but it was still wonderful.
And you thought that joining the sporty group was the thing for you.
I don't know. It seemed like a good fit. I mean, Drew is a great athlete. I then had a lot of meals, as we all did with everybody, and I sort of started to get disabused of it. But like my first impression was like just BDs and then like Dooxman.
Yeah, jocks.
One step less jockey.
Well, so that is 1998.
Yeah, that was 98.
98.
Yeah.
It was jockier then, I think.
The group was. There were more athletes. Brian, what was your impression of?
I was talking to somebody about this last night after a few Maurice Cups. I feel like the vibe of the group when I was rushing, I did rush a lot of groups. My freshman class, my suite, 3 of the 4 of us were rushing a cappella groups, and so it was sort of a chaotic, weird time in that room. But the vibe of the Doox at the time was very, felt more sort of, I think, convivial than a lot of the other groups. I remember, like, the musicality, I think, was clear front and center. It was clear that this was a group that could sing well and valued singing. And I remember very distinctly, on one of those rush meals, the sort of Doox mantra of "we tap the best singers" as sort of a clear sort of delineation. There's always an asterisk here. Then there the asterisk.
Yeah, the official asterisk was.
Yes.
My
Best
recollection
sporty
is
singers.
the best singers who aren't assholes.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's very important.
And who are sporty.
But it really, the vibe of the group, I think, and what really sort of drew me to the group was it seemed like everybody really enjoyed being around each other and enjoyed the camaraderie. And it really felt, in a lot of ways, like a family, like a chosen family. And I think, and we can probably get into at some point, the sort of queer-codedness of the Dooxmen at the time. But everyone just felt, I think, a little more comfortable in their skin and comfortable with sort of who they were and what they were all about than a lot of the other groups on campus. And I think that sort of showed in who sort of naturally resonated and was drawn to the Dooxmen.
Yeah. Matt, what's your feeling on that?
That was you, James, and Eric.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
See, when you're
And Nacapella Joe.
yeah,
The roommate
Nacapella
was
Joe.
not an acapella.
Right.
He was not acapella.
When you were a rush manager, you're
clever.
like forever
Yeah.
scarred to remember these things. My first impressions of the group actually were because I was a very cool person in high school. I did the Yale Model Congress.
Oh.
So
This was a model.
as a sometime senator from a small independent school in Central Mass, I came and did congressional things, play acting, and in between our important debates on legislation, we were entertained by various singing groups. And so I think the times that I was on campus in high school, I think that like we saw the Alley Cats at some dining hall or something, but we always saw the Dooxmen at the kind of like big, and I remember like then singing this and big, anyways, but and it was this amazing singing. And then total anarchy for Istanbul, because they did Istanbul at this thing, and it was this like there's like hundreds of like high schoolers or whatever, just like watching like, and again, so like there was like a range of like what people looked like, what they were doing, but they were all doing this like insane thing, and they were also all singing very well. And then so when I at that point didn't know that I was going to come here for school, and eventually did, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do a cappella. And so the only groups that I rushed were the Alley Cats and the Dooxmen, and that remained true, that it was like, oh, this group is the best sounding of the groups, has the best arrangements, and is fun as hell. This is a group that's going to do Toothpaste at Woolsey, and is also like going to do like Ave at Dwight. And
Can you explain what toothpaste is for those who don't know what toothpaste is? Does someone have a cup?
People know it. We're not going to do toothpaste.
We're doing toothpaste tonight, though, right?
A 200-person toothpaste.
Yeah.
People know what toothpaste is? It's an intro. It's an intro from the gross out years of Dooxman.
The 40-year era.
Where
it's the 90s, I think is what they're called. And it's like, I love.
It was a parody of television or ads.
Yeah.
So, I like toothpaste.
I like Crest toothpaste because it makes my breath taste so fresh. And a person like brushes his teeth and spits into like a little spit cup, and like another person's like, I like Crest toothpaste because you see where this is going, and they use the same cup, and then the last person in line is like, I like Crest toothpaste because it tastes so good, all the way down, and chugs the discard.
If I remember,
It still works.
It's still fresh after all these years.
Anyways, is this a good thing to do? No.
No.
This is bad. This is not a good thing to do.
It's good if you want Matt Morello.
But if you want me to be in the video. But they also did Hungry Hungry Hippos at Dwight. Costner.
Classic.
So but like that sort of tension of not taking themselves too seriously / taking it very seriously.
Yes.
That like we're gonna do this. We're gonna make big cardboard that looks like Hungry Hungry Hippos, and do this with volleyballs.
Sunday Bloody Sunday.
Yeah, which Drew sang, dressed up as Bono.
Well, and I think that was the thing too, that the Dooxmen always felt like they took the stupidity just as seriously,
Very seriously.
as anything else.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that sort of, in some ways, encapsulates the culture, where it's just the dumbest thing you can imagine, taken way too seriously, really sort of captures the spirit of it a bit.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we saw that in the Meisterships, I think, too.
Yeah.
so along those lines, Drew, is there any specific highlight or low light of your career, or just a story you might want to share about your time in the group, not involving the ripping of your pants, which we can share later?
My pants ripped once. Yeah, that was one thing. But I guess we're going to talk about that in the embarrass Drew portion of the panel.
Or exalt.
That was my highlight.
Yeah. I'll just tell that story maybe, because I don't have another story to tell. I was pitch my junior year, and I guess there's a tradition. I don't remember the tradition part of that, but like that there's like a speech that's given.
Imagine a world with.
I don't think that this was then, though. I think
All right. Well, so and then I was sort of trying to encourage people to sing with dynamics. That was a thing that we
Classic.
cared a lot about in my year. And like I was likening singing with a lot of dynamics to like you want to show like a little, like you show a little bit, and then you kind of, you know, you're demure, and then you show a little bit, and then in a particular song, I thought there was a moment where you would really just, you know, let it rip. And when I did this, I ripped my pants so loudly, and immediately heard.
I believe we were in a church and you sort of just barreled your way through several pews.
Yes, I think you caught me on a different floor of the church, but you guys definitely caught me.
Yeah, there's no escaping.
So highlight / low light, I guess, depending.
It's good that it's both.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're both. Brian, do you have
Oh gosh, I don't know.
so many?
Come back to me. Too many things.
Matt, anything that leaps to mind for you?
No, I was gonna do Drew's pants. That was it.
We were doing a traditions talk earlier about gouging McDonald's, and one of my favorite memories was involving the aforementioned chair sacrificer, Brian Stromquist, who was ordering and also flirting with the clerk at a McDonald's. And as he was speaking to him, he was also very slowly unrolling the vinyl advertisement that was beneath the checkout counter. And then by the end had rolled it up and then very quietly walked away with his bag and also holding a 3-foot-long tube. He'd stolen. And then as soon as he got the door, he wore it like a cape, I believe, and ran out.
That's dedication.
It's really incredible. Because we all, while we're watching this happen, we're like, is he really stealing this? Sorry, receiving. But yeah, I think to talk about more about you were saying about the sort of group transition of the queer coding of the group or how it presents. That was definitely an aspect of the group that I, as sort of a more oblivious straight person at the time,
Just oblivious.
Just oblivious person. But it was definitely an aspect of the group that I think was very important, you know, and it was also, the group itself was learning how to sort of wrangle everyone's emotions and everyone's identity and how those things worked out. And I was wondering if maybe one of you wanted to talk about like your experience of that and how maybe the group evolved in your time there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, I don't know, it's sort of interesting. I feel like it was the early 2000s was a very sort of interesting time for, it felt like queer culture was changing very quickly, and the sort of the goalposts were moving very quickly. I remember at some point, you know, when I was a junior or senior at Yale, realizing that these incoming gay freshmen had you know, boyfriends in high school, which was a thing that was just, and I went to a very liberal high school in Los Angeles, and I remember there was one out person in high school at Harvard Westlake at the time, and it felt like the world was changing very quickly. And you know, I think, you know, an institution like Yale and the sort of the institutions within an institution like Yale are not designed to change and adapt quickly. And the Doox men at that time were definitely, it was very sort of, the vibe was much more sort of open and welcoming, and there was sort of an understanding that was part of, that sort of, you know, being open and welcoming of everybody, and that everybody within the group could be and sort of whoever they wanted to be and didn't have to sort of like push anything down. I remember, you know, the BDs, the Baker's Dozen, were very sort of known as the, you know, straight acting a cappella group at the time. Not actually what was happening behind closed doors, as is often the way with these things. And the Alley Cats, I think, very much had this like, oh, you can be whoever you are, but just like don't talk about it too much.
Did you feel like that as you were coming in, the Doox were open, or did it change over time? Or
I think it was, well, so, you know, when I was a freshman, the juniors in the group, you know, Jimmy Johnson and
John Lehman,
John Lehman, and Chirag Badlani, and
Chuck Coleman.
I think there was just sort of, there were a lot of different representations of different sort of flavors of what not straightness could look like in the group. And that, I think, was very eye-opening. It was very, I think, important for me personally, but I think it was very important for a lot of people to sort of see that there were sort of different ways to be and different versions of, there wasn't just sort of like one version that you could be. And it really did feel like a sort of chosen family in that way. And I feel like I really credit, that class and your class and Omar Christidis and them for sort of being, in a lot of ways, sort of teaching me how to be an authentic adult queer person, which is not anything that I had any way of knowing or learning. And it felt very important in that time, in this space. And I actually think it's a testament, I think, to the Dooxmen and to the Doox that I feel like the group has continued to be sort of on the cusp, on the cutting edge of conversations around identity and gender and sexuality, and really sort of, and always coming at it from a place of what is the thing to do right by the people in the group. There's a sort of humanity that the group I feel has always centered. And maybe that's sort of the other sort of pillar of Doox culture beyond dumbness done to the hilt, is that there's an underlying empathy and sweetness to it all that I think has carried through. Anyway.
Yeah.
So, this might be a fraught topic too, then, but in a different way, which is the Doox today, I think, don't really do intros anymore. But we mentioned this a little bit, but intros were a big part of the group when we were in it, and were especially big in the 90s. And I think that we've alluded to sort of the humor of that. And sorry, intros. Oh, what are intros? Skits. It used to be a thing where at Jam you'd have 2 songs and then an intro, a sketch. Some type of humor, or it could be a dance, it could be something, but it was something to break up the set. It wasn't just singing, a joke. In our year, we had Mr. Rogers come on stage, have a heart attack and die, and then get robbed. That was a sketch that happened during the 50th anniversary Jam, in case anyone is here for that. So it was not,
They weren't always good.
They weren't. Yeah, being good was, as I think Lefty would quote, a tradition more honored in the breach than.
Yeah.
But I want to maybe talk about that a little too, about how, what was a culture like in terms of humor? What was a culture like in terms of how you got along, not just interpersonally, but in terms of doing collaborative things together? I think. Well, Drew, if you want to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the main thing was like the music. The parts of our music that was serious, the music was serious, and everything else was silly. And some of the songs were silly, like "What's Your Name" was funny when we would do it or whatever. But it was really like it almost felt like we would do silly skits and things like that to give ourselves permission to take the singing very seriously. I mean, I think as we all felt like, I certainly felt like the Doox were the best sounding group on campus, and
100%.
that's a large reason why I joined.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I think there was also, it was a way to let different people in the group shine in different ways. Like we had a few people who, like, were not the most comfortable soloists in the world, and would admit that they didn't really want to be out there front and center, but they wanted to write skits and intros or choreograph the dance and have people doing lifts and things like that. And so it was a good chance for people to shine in different ways.
Did you guys inherit dancing, or did you guys invent dancing? When we saw you dance at the 50th reunion, those of us who were older was just like shocked. We could barely sing, for Christ's sake. Did dancing start with you, or did you inherit it?
There was a dance at the 40th.
Yeah, I feel like there's some video where there's a joke. Maybe it's mid-90s, Yoshi, maybe you know this, where someone comes on stage and says, like, we're the Dooxmen. We don't we don't do humor, and we don't do this, and we definitely don't do dancing, and then it turns into like a huge dance number. That might have already been several years old as far as Doox.
No, I think that was early 90s. Yeah, he predated me, so.
That maybe the jam.
It was,
we would always have
the
a
beginning
get
of
the jam
the
and
sets, we had
spot.
massive. Like we do with spring ball or something, we'd have two sets, and one of the sets we'd have some massive dance number with costumes and like heavy choreography and like running up the aisles and pulling stuff, and each year the next group had to top whatever happened.
I remember some of the first choreo put into a song, as I recall, was this was in the mid-'80s. The Doox dance was a dance done pretty much when Cool and the Gang's Celebration came on, and it was a line dance that everybody just launched right in. And so for the reflex, which was Ted's arrangement, where's Ted? Ted Schellinger. Anyway, it was a quintet that would come out, and they would say, I'm Duran, and I'm Duran, and I'm Duran, and I'm Duran, and we're Duran, 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 Duran. 5 times. And in one part, in the very middle of the song, they would start spreading out and doing the Doox dance, and by the time they, did the clap and turn, the audience went berserk. And I, if you ever needed to be convinced that like maybe choreography should be part of the show, for me, I realized, this is probably going to at some point become a bigger part. I had no idea where it would go, but well.
Yeah, so
I do think during our era, it was, and maybe I'm sure this happened at other times as well, but it was sort of generally understood during the sort of crush of a cappella jams in the spring, where everyone felt like they had to show up to everyone because everyone had friends in every group. There definitely was the vibe that the Doox jam was the one that people actually came to all of, as opposed to just showing up at intermission to say hi to their friends and pretend they'd been there. I think in part because we did break it up a little bit, and so it didn't feel like just a slog of singing. That there was also, stupidness and choreo at the same time.
slog of singing.
Yeah.
But I also do feel like the choreo really accelerated over the years, or amped up over the years that I was in the group. I think in part because of your roommate, Marcello, who you sort of strong-armed into doing the choreography for us, and he was actually a dancer.
Yes.
And actually knew how to whip people into shape in a rehearsal for dancing in a way that I don't think we realized we could.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden there were lifts and there were throws, and those had not...
No one died. As far as
that we're aware of, yeah.
Is there still Doox dance? Does that happen anymore?
Danny and I have a line dance that we would do.
So that's a no.
The moves from Doox dance are in I Want You Back. Still.
The turn and
interesting,
clap,
okay.
yeah.
And so the babies learn that dance every year. So.
They do. I want you back.
Where did the Kevin Costner skate come from?
Before our time.
I was in the room. I can't claim maybe but it was Andrew Heaney and Nate Clow who was here.
Yeah.
Those two sitting in Silliman, and I was in Silliman too. But in terms of that whole just going back and forth, I think maybe I said, there was the Robin Hood. So it was like adding we need another.
That and Andrew Heaney could do an absolute dead-on Kevin Costner impression.
I mean, I would say this: the dirty secret, though, is that we actually lifted that skit from the Second City Comedy Club.
Not that one. Oh, really? Not that one.
Not that one.
That was purely written.
Are you sure?
But we never lifted.
I thought you were dead.
Word association.
That
Proceed. As was pictured.
But yeah, it was this fantastic deadpan Kevin Costner, and Nate Clow being this incredible, like dynamic performer, and he would sing Kevin Costner's praises, and he'd say, "This great thespian," and then Kevin, Andrew Heaney would just stand there and be like, "The more I'm with these people, the more I respect them." It was just, if you build it, it will come. Okay. It was a very good intro. Very good intro.
I don't know if it ever happened, but we talked about, Costner was not as sort of central to the consciousness. Like, we talked about changing that to Keanu at some point. And then by the time we like kind of got around, like Costner was funnier. It was funnier because it was like so old for our age. We're like, this is another level of bizarreness on top. So we ditched Keanu.
Yeah, another thing we had done in our era, which is a tradition that I think has not continued, is Doox band.
Oh yeah.
Because there are a lot of musicians. Sorry? Doox band. So there'd be an intermission at Jam, and then musicians from the group would come on and play a rock song in tails
As a freshman?
and then leave, and then the dance would happen. So it was just, it was a whole production.
Yeah.
Do you recall when you got in the group, I mean, obviously as a freshman, you wouldn't have seen Doox band, but at some point during the year they said, oh, do you play trumpet?
I remember I did play trumpet. I remember at some point I was like, Mom, I need my trumpet. For my,
She's like, for your acapella.
For my acapella group, yeah.
Naturally.
She's like, what's happened?
Yeah.
She was just happy to be invited to New Haven. So it's fine.
Yeah.
But I remember Matt as a freshman singing Doox band. I can't remember what.
It was, I think Jansen sang the beginning of Untitled How Does It Feel, the D'Angelo song. So he did a very beautiful Jansen, how does it feel? You're like, okay, this is awesome. And then it broke into, for some reason, Get Up, I Feel Like Being a Sex Machine, right? And so we did Sex Machine, and no one, Jansen didn't want to do Sex Machine.
Oh.
And they were like, who will sing Sex Machine? I was like, I will.
Yeah.
And I did.
It was great.
Yeah. I remember really focusing on Omar's extremely stoned roommates, Billy and Seiji. And I was like, I have to win these guys over.
So my first interaction with Doox Band was when I visited as a pre-frosh. I was walking on, I guess, old campus, and I heard a band playing You Can Call Me Al, just like out of a room. And I was like, whoa, this place is so cool, what's going on? And then when I was rushing the Doox Men, I mentioned that story to Ben Landsberg, and he was like, that was me. We were practicing for Jam. I was like, oh, fucking awesome.
I mean,
Keep your windows open.
Well, I think that a lot of these stories is making me think of, and maybe this is projection. I'll just turn this into a therapy session for myself.
Yeah, let's do it.
Thanks. I feel like a lot of the things that we did, or I felt like a lot of pressure to be a caretaker of all of these traditions and all of this stuff and all these arrangements, and you have the band and the dance and whatever, and so we did a lot of things that we received in the group, and not knowing really where they came from, and having it, but just like, well, this is what you do.
Yeah.
Here's the machine. It's a big thing, and you run it.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, yeah, great. And then you have these old guys being like, yeah, you got to do it this way. And you're like, okay. And maybe that's just what it's always been like. But so it was like, yeah. When I don't recall in our era there weren't. It didn't feel to me like there were tons of new arrangements. A new arrangement was a fairly rare thing. It's like, oh, there's a new arrangement. Oh, okay. Maybe we'll do it. Maybe not. But we were singing the hits from the years before. Maybe we would edit things a little bit. Someone would tweak something. I was like, I don't like the bass line, and I want you back. I'm gonna fix that. But and then it was come Nathan and those guys in the next sort of generation after us who were no, we're gonna actually write a ton of awesome new arrangements. And it was just this flowering after. I feel in some ways that 50th that a few of us were lucky enough to be in the group at that point and sort of meet all these alums and whatever. It was oh, we're showing you this weird amalgamation of things that have kind of not calcified but kind of accumulated into what the Doox Men are, and then after that something maybe broke through a little bit. I don't know, that's a way that I felt about it at times, thinking about that. Yeah.
A really important tradition for me when I was in the group, and for I think basically everyone in this room past a certain time period is obviously Belt and the Chase. And for people who are lucky enough to be at the last reunion, folks from the 80s sort of talked about the origin story of that. And one thing that I was particularly surprised by was how much those guys, when they invented the stunts, those things are basically exactly what happens to this day. Like changing based on geography, you know, certain things aren't possible anymore. But the ideas that they came up with and the general framework has not changed. And it's funny because the group in a lot of ways changes very dramatically, you know, between years or between decades. But that specific tradition has stayed pretty much the same.
I wonder if part of that too is that because the Chase involves actual printed letters in envelopes, that there's just so much more of an actual physical history of it. You open the box and here's what was done the year before.
Yeah.
Whereas the rest of Doox traditions has always felt like this weird, chaotic game of telephone. And where when you join and you're a baby, you're like, oh, these are the traditions, this is everything, and then by the end of the year, you're like, this was just made up a year ago. I've been keeping this dildo in my room.
That was around for a while.
That's an old one.
I was old.
I mean, it's the dildo or the butt plug. I think
There's
there
two
are
different-
multiples, thankfully.
Yeah, I don't. The lines blur at some point. I don't know what the definition is.
I do want to talk about Belt a little bit more, though. I think Belt is in some ways also, though, it can be a dividing movement. There are people who don't make it through Belt.
Are there babies here?
No, they're babies here. Sorry, and for the people who don't know what Belt is does not mean initiation.
Dooxmen don't have an issue.
Dooxmen don't have initiation.
No belts.
But it was a time period where the new taps would go through would be given a series of challenges and stunts that they had to perform, and it would culminate, and they had to do it themselves, and the upperclassmen would not speak to them, and they would wear sunglasses all week. So you'd have situations like I was in class with a freshman, Maddie. We were in a 4-person music theory seminar, and I just sat in sunglasses several days just at the table and didn't say anything.
I remember emailing my physics professor and saying that I had to have eye surgery. And would need to be wearing sunglasses for a week or so. And then Gaurav, the freshman, didn't have the courtesy to show up to physics class that entire week.
Oh my goodness.
But I had already laid the groundwork, so I had to sit in class with these sunglasses for nobody's benefit.
Well, ours.
Yeah.
I mean, it's worth it now.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if you guys could talk about what Belt meant to you, or the Chase, or that sort of time of year where I think things can, New Haven can be pretty grim in February, and it can be a heavy time, but also can be a very cathartic and, I don't know, emotionally useful time.
If I'm recalling correctly, we lost a member. He just quit. We lost a member of our class during Belt, and I think there was a little bit of a sense in my year, at least the way I took it. It was like Belt was a little harsh. No offense, Ben. Sorry. I think we sort of tried a little bit to soften it and to make it. I mean, you still put your sunglasses on and didn't talk to them for a week, but I tried not to throw beer cans at anybody during the Chase. And
only empty ones.
Only empty ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is like it figured out our class. Like it figured out who was staying and who was going, and it made us really work together.
The Chase is a scavenger hunt, and to describe
Very
it crudely,
extensive.
But it's an all-night event. You start at 5 o'clock and you end usually late in the morning.
Yeah, and it's beyond a scavenger hunt. It is a sort of not only well orchestrated, but obviously thoroughly sort of managed scavenger hunt. And so I think the aspects of Belt that really sort of worked and resonated, for me at least, and for my class, was that it always felt like you were being thrown into a sort of chaotic week, and you sort of had the rug pulled out from under you in a number of ways. But you always still felt that the upperclassmen in the group were spending as much, if not more, of their time that week making sure that everything was happening and going according to plan. And you felt that attention, not only to detail, but that attention to you as the freshman. And the Chase, I think, really exemplified that, where there would be these magical moments where, you know, you'd be reading a letter out loud in a rotunda, and it would tell, you know, as you're getting to the end of the letter, you know, wait until you hear the sign. And as soon as you finish saying it, the elevator dings and the doors open. And there was this sort of orchestration of it that I think, you know, sort of made literal the feeling like you were part of a bigger thing. And it felt like the manifestation of a lot of what the group metaphorically was about.
Well, you know the derivation of the Chase, like why it exists. So it was my class was the first year that went on the Chase, and it was because the group had by mistake scheduled a gig on campus during that week, and they're like, oh my God, the babies can't show up. So the whole purpose of it was to get the babies busy for several hours. So
very convoluted.
Yeah.
What is the simplest thing we could
Necessity
do?
is the mother of invention, I guess.
And it was just the serendipity of it that it was so cleverly done. Paul Matsumoto wrote a lot of it. It was, but just such clever stuff that actually endured and became a great tradition. And it was totally because the group just screwed up and had a jam schedule.
Yeah. So for the folks who didn't go through it, part of the Chase also is, you know, you've gone all week as a first year not speaking to your upperclassmen, and then you have the scavenger hunt. But during the scavenger hunt, you never see anyone. You never see any upperclassmen. So this thing sort of unfolds. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie The Game with I forget. With Sean Penn from the mid-90s, but it's a little bit like that. It's like, is this sort of this alternate reality that exists? Because how could all this unfold without anyone even being present?
Yeah.
And these letters are appearing out of nowhere, sort of Wonderland style.
And you don't chew the wafer.
And you never chew the wafer. But then the first the first person you're supposed to ever see in the evening is the night ends, and it's the pitch pipe. So in our case, it was Drew waiting with like warm pizza to sort of like cap the night for you, to say like, you've gone through this incredible, like sometimes arduous but also extremely fun evening, and then also like here's dinner, honey. You know, like we care about you, and this is sort of like you're getting to the end of the week. And ours went extremely late. I think it was like 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. And Drew was like waiting there under Yorkside, sunglasses on, just holding these pizzas, waiting for us to finish. And it was really worth it. You know, yeah, exactly. As Brian was saying, it was an incredible moment of, yeah, the upperclassmen are really here for us.
Yeah,
it's really amazing. I'm trying to think. I had another set of questions. Is there anything else from the time that sort of leaps to mind that you want to speak about?
No. I don't remember anything from that era at all.
Brief is beautiful.
Brief is beautiful.
Occurs to me. I mean, these good people have been sitting, right? So
yes.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody.